welcome back everybody to another review. Today we're going to be talking about the very, very long awaited, most anticipated Danny Boyle's 28 Years Later. So like I said, this movie has been long awaited for years. This is a sequel that I think they have tried to do. I don't know how long now or how many times they tried to get this off the ground, but something it's like always kept it from happening. And now Danny Boyle is back. He finally got it. He got Alex Garland back to write it, which Alex Garland is, I'm a huge fan of his writing and directing, and same with Danny Boyle. I haven't seen a lot of his movies. I've seen like Train Spotting 1 and 2 and the 28 Days Later, and I think I've a handful of his other movies, but I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. I like them a lot. They have a very unique style, especially Danny Boyle when it comes to these type of movies. There's a way that he shoots stuff and the way that he does certain camera angles and the way certain things are shot like above and zoomed in and stuff like that that's really unique. But I think for me kind of works for a movie like this. I also found out just the other day that this movie apparently was shot completely with an iPhone 15 Pro. I don't know if all of it was shot with it or if it just the majority of it was shot with it, but either way, that's impressive, especially how beautiful certain shots of this movie were. That's amazing. So, as per usual, I know there's a lot of stuff they really didn't tell about this movie, about like kind of what the movie is about, and I know the trailers kind of don't really give anything away of like about what the story is going to be about or anything. So I'm going to try my best to tiptoe around that as I usually do because I don't want to spoil anything or give anything away for people that want to go into this movie completely blind. Essentially, this is a coming of age story about this kid who has to go out like on the mainland, who has to do all these trials and tribulations of becoming a man and trying to, he's going to be the future generation of this community that he's a part of, and Aaron Taylor Johnson plays his father, and he's trying to teach him some of that. And as the story goes, there's something along the way that takes him back out into the mainland that he is trying to get to for a particular reason. I think the acting overall in this movie is great across the board. I think Jodie Comer is fantastic. She's really the one that kind of gets in there that is really the scene stiller of the entire movie. She kind of has more of a role in more of the second act. And she's fantastic. Aaron Taylor Johnson is fantastic, and the kid that plays their son, Alfie Williams, I think he does a phenomenal job. This movie is mainly his story, so he has to carry a lot of the weight of this movie with him, and he does a fantastic job. Now, some of the things I do really like about this movie was that, first of all, it was beautifully shot. I think some of the scenes of the landscape it's beautiful. It's funny because you're looking at this just beautiful, beautiful backdrop of this movie with all these horrific things going on in the forefront, and it really adds this neat dynamic to it. And there's also these just gorgeous shots, and there's a scene in the trailer of this where it's a very far off wide shot of like trees and this beautiful sky, and in the background you can see like some of the infected, in that moment, and they're just standing there, and you're looking at again at this beautiful landscape, and then all of a sudden these infected just start to slowly come closer and closer to the camera, and it's very effective in the way that it's shot, and that happens a couple times in this movie, and that's something I really enjoyed, the way that they did that. One of the other things I really enjoyed was the use of the camera with these quick cuts for certain things. There's certain times where a character will be talking and something will, happen all of a sudden, will like jump and all that stuff, and there's a way that certain angles are on somebody's face, and then somebody will kind of be just right here, and the way that it's shot is really unique. He did that a lot in 28 Days Later, and he kind of brought that to, this movie. Like I said, that's kind of almost like his, Danny Boyle style. But I think it really works for a movie like this, especially with a movie that is kind of tense and on edge anyway as you go along with this movie. I do enjoy the characters. There's a whole plot with with the three main characters that you kind of go with. Again, I'm trying not to give anything away that you really are on board for. You really want to see the son succeed in what he's trying to do when he gets back onto the mainland. Of course, things happen along the way, where things don't go as planned, but I think that just adds really to the tension of the movie. And I'll be honest, there is some pretty tense moments in this movie. Like for me, I found at least 3 or 4 moments very tense. Like So most of it is in, I'll admit, is in the first like 45 minutes of the movie when he first goes to the mainland with his dad. I think that's just some very gripping stuff. I was like holding my breath, and of course there's more scenes later on when he has to go back that is just equally like I was legit on the edge of my seat. I was really glued in, and I like it was tense, like very like one of those those moments where you're like, oh shit type tenses. And I think that it was so well done how they executed what they were trying to do, and it paid off so well. I even think the start of this movie, when it's like the very first frame of it, it's just oozing with dread. You know something is happening. I mean, obviously, if you've seen the other movies, you know what world we're about to be dropped into. You know the stakes of what's about to happen and all that good stuff. But there was just something that, at least to me, that latched on to me, that I was just like in this thing of dread the whole time while it was going on. And within that first act, something happens that involves a bunch of kids that I was like, damn. I was like, all right, shit, we're going there. Okay, interesting. They also do a really good job of introducing not only these different type of infected, but we get to see how they've evolved over these 28 years. And again, not going to tell anything of that, but with that, it involves new ways of killing, I shall say. So some of the kills are absolutely brutal. Like there's one scene in particular I can think of that again, I was like in the theater like, shit. So they do a really good job of adding that in, which I thought was really cool. And I actually really like this dynamic of where the infected, has gone and how they've evolved. There is a part near probably around the third act of the movie, which involves Ray Fiennes and Jodie Comer and their son, Alfie, that I think is really great for the movie, because I think while some I can see saying that they think it would slow down the pace of the movie, to me personally, I feel like that moment was very crucial to the story, because I feel like that what happens in that moment is a big part of the son Spike coming into his manhood, like accepting how things have to be, and it sets him on this path that I think we're going to get for these other two movies that are coming, because obviously you're going to be following his character. And it's one of those things that really, I think, drives his who he is now and who he's become because of that. But not only that, I feel like it was a really almost sweet and tender moment, while yet being very dark, very, very dark. But to me, it had to be dark because you're in this world, this post-apocalyptic infected world. But it almost added this human heart element to a movie that is so bleak and dark. And I don't know, it worked for me. Like I said, I know probably for a lot of people, they might say that it slowed the pacing down and things of that nature. But for me, I thought it added more depth to not only his mother, but to Spike's character as well. And for Ray Fiennes. Ray Fiennes, I haven't talked about him, but he's not in this movie a lot. He pops up, I don't want to say where, but he pops up in places of the movie. And he's not in it for long, but the little bit he's in it he's fantastic. Ray Fiennes, of course, he's one of those actors that dude can nail anything you give him. So he's great, as well. But yeah, there's something about that moment I thought was really tender and sweet, and it just added something to this movie that I thought was crucial to the characters. I also really enjoy that this movie is set on like an isolated island. Like their community is on this island, which I think was cool. I know this movie doesn't really follow 28 Weeks Later because it was so, I think from what I read, they said they were originally going to, but so many years had passed at that point that they were like, so they were just going to try to continue on from 28 Days Later. Now, I could be wrong, but that is what I read, or they're just trying to, continue the story from, wherever. But I know in 28 Weeks Later, they tried to have that, like that isolated community, like in this one where they kind of had the army and stuff set up as a perimeter. because they believe that the infected was gone. But I believe, I thought that was an interesting take. But in this one, I think it's neat how they're completely isolated from the world, and the only way you can get to the mainland is you follow. It's almost like this big bridge-looking island that leads from their isolated island onto the mainland, and you can only go out at certain points in the day when the tide is low enough. Because if the tide rises, it completely drowns out the island, and you cannot get back to where you need to, and you can't swim because they talk about in the movie how if you swim, the tide will pull you too away from the island and you'll drown. So again, that also adds this extra level of tension to it, to where you're like, oh shit. So not only are you, if you go to the mainland and a bunch of shit's going down on there, you are physically stuck. Like there's nothing you can do about it. So again, that adds a real extra layer of tension to it. But I also really like that. I like this idea of them out on this island. I think that's just a cool element to their community. Now, I have seen online, and I've read some articles, and I've just read some people's things about how they did not like certain things in this movie. And a lot of people said because it was a British thing, like certain things were what they were comparing stuff to was certain things in Britain, and I totally understand that. That's something that goes over my head. I wouldn't get it because I'm not British. And same with the ending, the way that this note that it leaves on, these characters that are introduced at the end of it. Not only did people feel like they were like, what the hell was that? Because it felt like they just, were completely taken out of the movie and watching a whole different movie at that point. But they're setting up, they think that they are paying not homage because of who the guy was, but that's supposed to be a play on a certain person that was in Britain. And I cannot remember the guy's name. Again, I'm not British. I just saw the name last night, and what a lot of British people were talking about, that's who they think they're having a play on that guy. And from what I understand, the dude's not a good guy at all. Like some of the stuff he did, if not all the stuff he did, is just not good. And if they're going to go the route that the actual guy, the stuff that he did, if they're going to go that route in the movie, that's going to be interesting, especially from where it leaves us with Spike, their son. But I don't know if they're actually going to go that route, or if they're just going to go a completely different route with it, but they're just, it's there for people that get the reference. And so, I don't know. So that's going to be an interesting thing. So I learned that while I was doing some research last night about some things, and I thought that was pretty interesting because I felt like it was kind of odd, like the way that these new characters just popped up out of nowhere and went this, moral, I don't know, it went this like it did. The tone felt like it changed for a second, because leading up to those characters, it felt like you were going to go in this kind of real dark tone, and then all of a sudden when these characters appear, it kind of turns into this real goofy, tone, and so it kind of takes you out of it, and you're just kind of like, okay. But I don't know. I still was in the movie. I still enjoyed it. Up until last night, I didn't know that this movie was going to be this split, and like there were going to be this bit much of a divide among this movie, because most of the people I saw, they left very disappointed. They didn't like it because they're just so massive fans of the other one. They said it didn't live up to the other one, like, didn't compare to the other ones for them. And I don't know. To me, I found myself really enjoying it. Like like somebody said, someone's like, wait till this opening weekend is over, or possibly next weekend, and see how divided people are. A lot of people, it's not that they didn't like it. A lot of people left really disappointed. They say that they liked the trailer more than the movie. And like I said, I don't know, because yes, I understand that honestly the first 45 minutes is very tension filled and balls to the wall, and then I feel like once that's over, it kind of takes a moment to relax and has to dwell out some more of the story and trying to get some more things going with that. And so it kind of slows down a little bit. But I was never, and there's a little bit of, zombie carnage and stuff in between there, or infected carnage in between there. But I don't think it really ever ramps back up to how it was in those 45 minutes. Yes, there are moments of it, like I said at the very beginning of this review, that there was 3 or 4 moments where I felt genuine tension, but not as much as I did from that first 45 minutes. So, like, I understand where people are coming from with that, but for me personally, I still enjoyed it. I still had a good time with it. And I know, like a lot of people said, like I said just a second ago with the trailer stuff, a lot of people felt like the trailer was misleading. I just think the trailer didn't really give away a lot of the story stuff of it, because honestly, the stuff in the trailer is really most of the first act of the movie with just teeny little snippets of other stuff that happens throughout. And I I don't know. To me, yeah, I enjoyed it. I found myself having a good time with it. I was looking forward to this movie. It's one that I wasn't really let down by. I mean, there's been a few movies this year so far that I've went into with these super high expectations, and this, I don't know, this wasn't. This was one of them that I was very anticipated. It's one of my most anticipated movies of the year. But I don't know. I left having a good time with it. Nothing affected my viewing of it or the experience I had or my expectations really. I just, like I said, and if anybody that didn't like it or are disappointed by it, like I said, I've read a lot of people's concerns and their takes on it online. Totally understand. I totally understand where people are coming from. Totally get it. So if this movie didn't work for you, totally understand it. That's the beauty of art. People can like what they like and dislike what they dislike, and I respect them for it. I just think especially if you have a valid argument as to why, I'm all for it. Like I said, I'm cool with people liking or disliking whatever. And like I said, I totally understand why this movie didn't work for some people. I just think for people that didn't know, there's actually going to be two other of these movies. The second one is 28 years later, The Bone Temple, and I do not know what the third one is called, but this movie is going to kick off a trilogy, and the second one has already been shot, and it's directed by Nia DaCosta, which I'm excited for because she did Candyman, and I'm a really big fan of that Candyman, not remake, but I don't know if you want to call it a remake or legacy sequel, whatever you want to call it. But either way, I was a big fan of the visuals of how she did that movie, so I'm very, very curious and hopeful what she's going to do with the second 28 years later. But I think as the story develops, I'm curious to where it's going to go, and especially how the last one's going to go. I'm assuming the third one will probably be the actual last one. And I think maybe it might be one of those things for the people that didn't like this movie or were disappointed. Maybe it might be one of those things to where, this is the first half of the story, and once you see the second part and the third part, and if you can watch them all together, it might be one big cohesive thing. Once you see the full story, you might be like, okay, I can forgive some stuff that happened in the first movie or vice versa. But, it all depends. Like I said, it depends on the execution of the other movies and how they unfold and all that. And I totally get, because I was kind of concerned about this as well going into this movie, about this movie kind of having that part one syndrome. We had a ton of that a couple years ago where there was a bunch of part ones of something coming out, where if you have a part one, I understand of wanting to leave it on a cliffhanger because you want people to come back and watch your movie. But don't let that get in the way of you telling a nice, cohesive, one narrative story where you can at least have a nice wrap-up thing at the end while, not answering all the questions. You can leave a couple loose ends and some threads hanging, but at least wrap up the story that you want to tell in the beginning to at least somewhat of a satisfying ending. So that way, if something something happens to where you don't get to make another movie, you're not left with this unsatisfying cliffhanger you're like, well, shit, all that's out the window now. I did think it was, it's hard for me because right when it got to the ending, how it was going to wrap up, I was on board I understand what people are saying about the tonal shift, and I was like, this is going to end on something that I'm satisfied on, that I'm like, this is interesting. And once that flipped into the other group was introduced, and like I said, that tonal change happened, I was kind of like, okay, this is interesting. I was like, I don't know if I like that as much as I would have liked if they would have just let, happen what was going to happen, and before the team was in, or this group was introduced. But now that I know a little bit more about maybe what they were going for with that particular character and that particular group, that kind of leaves my mind cranking, like I said earlier, about are they going to take that particular character in the route of who they're uh, not paying homage to, but who they're referencing to or trying to reference to. So that left me curious. So I'm very, it's one of the things where I'm mixed on because I don't know how to feel, but it might be one of those things where it's how the other two movies will play out. I'm still very curious how these other movies are going to play out. Cannot wait for them. I think the second one is supposed to come out in January of next year, so it's not too long. And trust me, it'll be here before we know it with how fast time is flying. But overall, I had a really good time with this movie. I really enjoyed it. I don't know, something just worked for me. And I might be on an island with that because I have seen a lot of people where a lot of people were like, nah, they were just disappointed. The things didn't work for them. I can't get into why certain things didn't work because I don't want to spoil anything. And like I said, I don't want to give anything away for anybody that wants to go into this movie completely blind. I recommend that. I mean, the trailer, like I said earlier, doesn't really give anything away. It's kind of just mainly stuff in the first act with like maybe little teeny like flashes of stuff that happens later on in the movie. But other than that, it was this is one of the trailers that's actually safe, unless you're on board that like some people were that this movie mismarketed what the movie actually was. But it all depends on who you are. I recommend seeing it if you can. Try to go see it like in a Dolby Cinema or an IMAX or something like that because the sound design is amazing in the Dolby. And I know it's kind of hard depending on it might be easier depending on where you live. I live in an area where I got one Dolby theater, and if a Disney or an animated movie comes around, that takes up fucking every theater we have, including that particular theater. And so last night, I had to go last night at 11 o'clock at night to go see this movie in the Dolby, just to get, because I wanted to get that full experience out of it. So thank you to the Disney movie and Lilo and Stitch that's taken up all the showings in there. So, but anyway, I would recommend if you can to go see it in the biggest theater in one of those things, especially one that's got Dolby was great because of the sound design. So I would recommend Dolby for that. Like I said, I might be on an island with it. I enjoyed it. I recommend it. Please don't come after me because I enjoyed it. If you didn't like it, if you were disappointed in it, I totally understand why. At least the arguments that I've read online and the concerns, I totally get it. I respect you for that. Just wasn't your thing. That's cool. Some things come out that it's just not people's bags, and some people it's like, yeah, I dug that. I'm on the island where I dug this one. So if you've enjoyed the other two movies, I would definitely go say watch it because it's in the same vein as that. People might argue that. Again, one of those things of people not liking it, but I would say if you've liked the other two, definitely go check this one out. It's definitely very bloody, that's for sure. So if you want a good bloody movie, this is it. But like I said, it's got great moments of tension, especially within the first 45 minutes. Fantastic, just nail-biting tension. And I wish, as much as I love the two or three other moments of that tension that was in this movie, it was high tension, but I wish it got back up on the level of the tension that it had in those first 30, 45 minutes. But other than that, and the thing I've talked about my mix with the ending or whatever, but other than that, I still really enjoyed it, had a good time with it, recommend it. So if you've seen 28 Years Later, please comment below and let me know what you thought about it. I'd love to hear if you were disappointed, what didn't work for you. If you loved it, if I'm not the only one on that island, if you really enjoyed it. If you do comment spoilers, just kind of comment something above it, says this is spoilers, so if anybody reads through it, nothing will get spoiled for them, so anything like that. As always, if this is the video you're finding me on, please come over and check out all my other 2025 reviews so far. I have a pretty good amount so far, more than I thought I did when I was looking at some the other day. So I was like, that's interesting. I'll leave a card up here or up here, wherever the thing goes, for my review, so you can just click on that and check it out. And as always, I will see all of you in the next one.